Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And of course, we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That is facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's Monday morning again. We're broadcasting live from a now quite warm, but still fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. We've got a great we've got a great show for you today. Our guest today is Judd Weiss. He was best known for being John McAfee's vice presidential running mate when John McAfee just recently ran against Gary Johnson and others for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination. I honestly think McAfee, you probably know him as the world-renowned hacker and founder of McAfee Associates, which is the premier antivirus creator. You may even have some of that software on your system as we speak. I really think that would have made for a quite interesting run, especially with all of the hacking talk. We would have actually had a presidential candidate who was a hacker and could have spoken to all of those things, as opposed to a libertarian presidential candidate who didn't know where Aleppo was or what Aleppo was. So we're going to talk with Judd about that and also just about the libertarian scene in general. We have some other stories today, including the new, but it looks like expanding feud between two senators, one Senator John McCain and a libertarian senator from Kentucky, son of famous libertarian Rand Paul. Senator Rand Paul and John McCain are in a feud, and it's pretty entertaining. I think that it will probably be heating up even more because we also wanted to cover this week the new news coming out of the conflict with North Korea. I think this is going to be a big one. And to help me cover all of these stories today, as always, my good friend, co-host, and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian.
Thank you, Vin.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. I feel a little vindicated with this whole Vinstradamus thing. As you will recall, hey, I'm just saying, as you will recall last week, I said that I really did feel that there was something akin to essentially war, potentially a global flashpoint starting to pop off, because I saw, and I said this last week, that things seem to feel a lot like they did right around this time in 2000. And we, of course, in 2001, I should say, and of course, then in the fall of 2001, we had September 11th. Following that, we had invasion of Afghanistan, and then in the March following that, March 2002, we had the invasion of Iraq. Now, we're still in Afghanistan. We're still in Iraq. I said it felt a lot like that. And then, what do you know? Within hours.
Right after you said that, I look on my Facebook feed, and sure enough, and I showed you that.
There's the North Korea, right?
Yeah.
What's funny is I didn't say it on the air because I didn't want to sort of put it out there into the ether, and for me to have caused things. But I did say right when we ended, I said, look, man, I think it's North Korea. I think North Korea is the flashpoint, right? And look, how many years? 20 years that North Korea has been like this enemy, right? Through a father and a son. But we could really take it back to the end of the Korean War, right? I mean, we went to war, and technically the Korean War is not over. There's just an armistice. Technically, it's not over. Technically, the United States and South Korea are still at war with North Korea and never stopped. It was just a ceasefire.
Yep.
So this week it happened. Now, Here's what's interesting, and I think that this ties in. Our guest today, Judd Weiss, was the vice presidential running mate for. It's weird that the Libertarian Party does that. Usually, the other parties, you get nominated, then you pick a running mate. But I guess the Libertarian Party, they do it a little bit differently. McAfee's running mate, John McAfee. I actually was unaware until after Gary, that shows how little I follow Libertarian Party politics, until after Gary Johnson was nominated. I wasn't even aware that McAfee was running, but I think that he's a super interesting person.
I didn't know that either.
How interesting.
Yeah.
The most famous hacker slash antivirus destroyer, right?
Yeah.
This is a guy who the news is always interviewing every time there's any hacking news, right? And we covered, of course, Vault 7 yesterday. There's been a ton of hacking stuff since the election, right?
Right, all kinds of stuff.
How much better would it have been? I mean, Gary Johnson is famous for saying, what's Aleppo? He didn't even know what Aleppo was in Aleppo, Syria. What a numbskull, right?
Yeah.
And not even really a libertarian was saying, oh, maybe you should vote for Hillary Clinton, his running mate as well. How much cooler would it have been for the third guy in the race to actually have been a hacker who could have spoken to all of the things that we were speaking to on the show?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it would have been much better. Super interesting.
But
and Judd Weiss too.
Well, he's awesome, right? Some people don't know him, but people in the libertarian scene have at least seen his photos, which is one of the things that he's famous for.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk with him about making libertarianism look cool.
Yeah.
Right? Because like Obama probably wouldn't have gotten elected quite so easily were it not for those Shepard Fairey Hope and Change posters.
Yeah.
Those iconic posters, right? Shepard Fairey. So it's like there's an aesthetic that you got to have if you're going to run. Judd is, I think, the forerunner of. He's really created what does the Libertarian Party, what does sort of the liberty movement on the political side look like. So that's an interesting conversation.
It's really cool.
But what I wanted to get into, because I think that this is the thread that ties a lot of this together, because it even ties in with McAfee. Now, we know that McAfee created McAfee Associates and has been busting viruses with the antivirus software since the beginning. He was, I think, that was the first antivirus company, I believe, was McAfee. There's been, and there are, in hacker circles, there is a conspiracy theory about McAfee.
Huh.
And that conspiracy theory is that McAfee actually creates the viruses.
Interesting.
That he then, like he's creating viruses, and that's how he's able to beat them. Now that's it's like, okay, that could kind of make sense, right? Like that's a reasonable conspiracy theory. The way it ties in is this. So last week we did a deep dive on Vault 7, and we showed that the CIA, what was released in Vault 7 and what WikiLeaks had said was big news, was really, they would have to have possession of your device. It wasn't really big tech.
No.
And you can go back, for those of you listening, go back and check. You can go to youtube.com/activistpost. If you just want to see that section, we've got it chopped down. What's interesting, if you go through and you look at the comments that have come in, both on the original and the chopped down version, there have been quite a few people who have said, because I went through and pointed out what's actually in Vault 7, as opposed to the hype, that I must be a CIA shill.
Whoa.
That I must be paid by the CIA.
Wow.
Which, look, if you don't have haters, you're doing something wrong. Right. So I'm happy to have the haters. Hi, haters. Like, I'm happy to have the haters. But I find this interesting. I find this interesting because this same week, also, I heard a previous guest of ours, Jordan Peterson. Somebody asked him about a conspiracy. It was kind of a conspiracy theory. What did he think of a theory that postmodernists had this whole plan laid out? And he said, a great quote that I tweeted, and I'm going to use it from now on. He said, "Assume stupidity before you assume organized malevolence." He said because he was saying most of the bad things that happen because of human stupidity. They don't happen because somebody was organized in doing that. So here's the thing. Now I'm in the CIA conspiracy, I guess. Right? Pointing out what's actually, I didn't make any conjectures. I just pointed out what was actually there and showed step by step with the actual documents. So showing the actual documents and putting out the actual truth, the actual facts, if it doesn't conform with someone else's conspiracy theory, now you get added into the conspiracy theory. Right? So today, just for them, I decided I was going to wear my little owl, my little Moloch, since now I'm an official member of the Illuminati, my little Moloch, and I just want to send out to the CIA I have not gotten the check. Okay? You clearly know my email address, and since you can have access to my phone already, why don't you send me a text, let me know either the tracking number of the check, or shoot me over a text and I'll shoot you my Bitcoin address. You can send me my payment in Bitcoin, okay? Because I haven't gotten it yet. Did you get it?
Not yet.
Did it come to the studio?
Not yet.
Damn them. See? So what I wanted to say, though, is this. The prediction stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So I do this often, right? The Vinstradamus thing has gotten to be kind of funny now at this point because it's often that I make these predictions. And the thing is, how am I making these predictions? Is it because I'm being tipped off by the CIA? Is it because I'm a member of the Illuminati? Is it because I'm going to Bilderberg meetings? How am I making these predictions?
It's magic.
How does this magic happen? And here's the thing, and this tells you a little bit about conspiracy theories. You've basically got two ways of saying what's going to happen in the future. Either someone is controlling it and they tell you what they're about to do, or patterns. Now, all of Austrian economics is about studying patterns, booms and busts. We had Mark Thornton on talking about the skyscraper curse. People can go back and look at the skyscraper curse interview. He's talking about a pattern that has gone for hundreds of years. Is there a hand behind that moving it? Well, go and look at climate records. The temperature going up and down and up and down. Is there a hand at work for that? Go look at the most basic of patterns, the seasons, or even more so, the sun rising and setting, and rising and setting, and rising and setting in different places that correspond to what day of the year it is.
Really interesting.
Tomorrow is the spring equinox, where we're going to have 12 days of sun and 12 days of night. We can predict that. I can predict that on March 21st, 20 years from now, somewhere around March 21st, 20 years from now, same thing. But here's what's interesting. That's not a hand at work. That's a pattern.
Yeah.
But in our early days of civilization, when they saw the sun going across the sky, to them that was a god in a chariot. It must be. There's no science. There's no nature. It must be a god. It must be a powerful person. The most powerful person that there is. A master of the universe. But someone that you've never met. But a human with a human mindset and human motivations, because the gods in the stories were motivated like humans.
Right.
So this is the god Apollo, or it's Ra in Egypt. Horus, carrying the sun across the sky. It must be. Because the only order in the world and the order in the universe means that there's a person doing it. There's a consciousness. So what if there are patterns that exist in our own human nature? We live in a world of patterns. We evolved in a world of patterns. Our bodies are tuned in. You get tired at night, don't you? Yes.
Pattern.
That's a pattern. You get hungry at certain intervals. That's a pattern. Your heart beats at a certain number of beats per minute. That's a pattern. You breathe at a certain number. So why wouldn't there be grander patterns that affect all of our culture?
Right.
Why wouldn't our culture move in patterns? But we know that it does because economists talk about booms and busts. So things like going to war, things like these sorts of conflagrations happening, periods of war, periods of peace, periods of economic distress, periods of abundance. What if all of this conspiracy, that there's some hand of these Illuminati, what if all that we've done in our modern time is we've replaced the gods of Olympus with some nebulous Illuminati? And throughout history, the job of the priest has always been to tell you that it's the gods and it's not nature. Great scene in the movie Apocalypto, the Mel Gibson movie, where the priest is basically telling all of them, if you don't repent, God will blot out the sun because he knows that there's an eclipse coming. It's a control mechanism.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about reflexivity too when you said that.
It's reflexive. it's reflexive. So keep that in mind as we move along. That maybe what we're dealing with, maybe the reason why things seem to repeat themselves is because things repeat themselves. Mm-hmm. The earth goes around the sun goes around on its axis, the sun rises, the sun sets, the moon moves in a predictable pattern, the tides move in a predictable pattern, every fucking thing moves in a predictable pattern. Why do we get to escape those patterns?
Yeah, I was going to say even human beings.
Why do we get to escape? We don't escape them.
No.
We're inside of them. So the thing is to know the pattern. That's how you empower yourself, as opposed to think that it's some malevolent force who's pitted against you, who wants to control you. Are there people that want to control you? Yes, there are. Do they get to escape the pattern? No, they don't. So if they want to control you, they need to understand the pattern. And if they understand the pattern and you don't, they control you.
Yep.
But it's not out of your grasp to understand it. So we have, in terms of conspiracies, maybe that's a good place for us to start, because this Rand Paul, John McCain feud is pretty hilarious. What I want to say is, when we're talking about conspiracies, because it's very funny, I want to start with this to give some context. Let's show this ISIS photo. When we're talking about conspiracies, here is John McCain. We've shown this photo before. This is John McCain. Over his right shoulder there, that's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. That's the head of ISIS. This is John McCain meeting with not just him, but others who have turned out to be members of ISIS, al-Nusra. This is when they were just the freedom fighters. Look at him with his little American flag pin and the great smile on his face and his little paralyzed arm. So, conspiracy or stupidity? Is John McCain an evil genius? Or is he a blithering idiot? That's our first story. Because I call him Insane McCain. Sometimes insane in the membrane or McCain in the membrane. I think I'm going to go with McCain in the membrane. And he truly, truly showed why he's deserving of that title this week. And I'm so glad that there is a libertarian. I gave him a bit of shit last week, but he redeemed himself this week. Mr. Rand Paul. Let's get a little background on how this feud, although it was simmering, how it broke into the public. Let's see this McCain.
Want to go to Capitol Hill? Senator from Kentucky, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Rand Paul. Senator, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
We are going to get to health care in just a moment, but first want to get your reaction to the words Senator John McCain had for you from the Senate floor yesterday. Let's listen.
I note the senator from Kentucky leaving the floor without justification or any rationale for the action that he has just taken. That is really remarkable, that a senator blocking a treaty that is supported by the overwhelming number, perhaps 98 at least, of his colleagues, would come to the floor and object and walk away. And walk away. The only conclusion you can draw when he walks away is he has no argument to be made. He has no justification for his objection to having a small nation be part of NATO that is under assault from the Russians. So I repeat again, the senator from Kentucky is now working for Vladimir Putin.
So, Senator, a little context around that. The vote was around putting Montenegro into NATO. What's your reaction to Senator McCain's characterization of your objection?
Well, I think he makes a really, really strong case, for term limits. I think maybe he's past his prime. I think maybe he's gotten a little bit unhinged. I do think that when we talk about NATO, there can be a rational discussion about the pros and cons of expanding it. We currently have troops, combat troops, in about 6 nations. We have troops actively just stationed in probably a couple dozen others. We have a $20 trillion debt. And one of my favorite articles of the last couple years was one that talked about the angry McCains. And if we put active troops and got involved in combat where McCain wants us to be, they put a little angry McCain on the globe, on the map, and it's virtually everywhere. So his foreign policy is something that would greatly endanger the United States, greatly overextend us.
So Senator Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, according to Insane McCain, is working for Vladimir Putin. Now, this should indicate to you the level that someone's actions must reach before John McCain says they're working for Putin. Now, if we go back a little bit, we see that John McCain has accused a lot of people of working for Putin. He was one of the people behind the leak of the documents, the supposed documents, turned out to be fake, saying a whole bunch of people that were working for Donald Trump were working for Putin. I think this puts a whole new spin on everything. But, I mean, why not, right? Why not? He must be working for Putin, saying the truth, speaking the truth, right? Just like I'm working for the CIA by pointing out that there's nothing in Vault 7. Rand Paul. Let's hear a little more about, because, hey, maybe John McCain is right. He's been right in the past, right? Hasn't he? Rand? Let's hear it.
What do you make of McCain's statement that we're creeping towards a situation where people are potentially supportive of dictatorship in this country? Is that over the top, or is there a concern?
I think Senator McCain's perspective is colored by his disagreements with President Trump on foreign policy. If I were to look at foreign policy, I would say John McCain's been wrong on just about everything over the last 4 decades. He advocated for the Iraq War, which I think destabilized the Middle East. If you look at the map, there's probably at least 6 different countries where John McCain has advocated for having U.S. boots on the ground. John McCain's complaint is we're either not at war somewhere, or if we're at war, we leave too soon. So we're not there soon enough, and he wants us to stay forever wherever we send troops. So that's a foreign policy that is at odds with President Trump. And also the idea of engagement, the idea of foreign policy realism, I think fits more neatly with President Trump. And with John McCain, the neoconservative label of let's make the world safe for democracy and we're going to topple every regime hasn't worked. I mean, our intervention to destabilize the Assad regime has really made the chaos worse in Syria. And if you were to get rid of Assad today, I would actually worry about the 2 million Christians that are protected by Assad. So I think it's more a foreign policy debate. And Trump and McCain are on opposite sides of that debate. And I tend to sympathize more with the president that we need a change. We don't need to continue to have regime change throughout the world, nation building. It's expensive, and we don't have enough money to rebuild our own country if we're rebuilding everyone else's country.
So let's see with the looming crisis in Asia. Rand Paul clearly against engaging in a negative way, in a bellicose way with Russia. John McCain wants to go to war with Russia. But someone that John McCain definitely wants to go to war with, and that Rand Paul has not quite, as far as I know, has not spoken out publicly, at least not recently, is our second story. Because there is a showdown occurring, and it's between Donald Trump and a real dictator, Kim Jong-un, dictator of North Korea. Now, as we said, North Korea has been an enemy of the United States for pretty much the lifetime of everybody that's alive right now, for the most part. We've been at war. South Korea and North Korea have been at war. South Korea is a glittering jewel of a country. I mean, it's one of the most prosperous countries in the world. It's the most wired country in the world. That is to say, like, it has the fastest internet that's the most accessible of any country in the world. A lot of people don't know that. You think about all of the companies that are out of there. I mean, you might be watching this. It's actually very likely that you're watching this on, say, a Samsung phone. Korea. I mean, tons and tons of companies, very successful, highly capitalist country, certainly has benefited from interacting with the West. The North, on the other hand, communist hellhole. Would we like to see that change? Yes, I think a lot of people would. I think Rand Paul would definitely like to see that change. But the winds are blowing in the direction that there is an actual conflict. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to break that down all the way through of the last, say, month, because that's really when this started. See, because this whole thing started, we talk about conspiracies and conspiracy theories. Well, this whole thing, like the beginning of World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. History repeats itself. This one, I would say, started with an assassination as well. We got this murder story, excuse me. This is from CNN, February 14th. Kim Jong-un's half-brother murdered with poison, South Korea says. The sudden death of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother was murder, South Korean officials announced Wednesday. Kim Jong-nam died Monday, soon after becoming ill at Malaysia's Kuala Lumpur International Airport, before an outbound flight to Macau. Lee Chol-woo, chairman of South Korea's National Assembly Intelligence Committee, told a press briefing Wednesday that Kim had been poisoned and the suspects were presumed to be two Asian females. It's not clear how he obtained that information or how Kim was poisoned. So what could this possibly mean? My initial impression with what's going on now, looking at it in hindsight, is if you're going to do regime change, whenever the U.S. does regime change, one of the things that they always set up beforehand, whether it was in Vietnam, whether it was in Iraq, whether it was in Afghanistan, they always go and find basically an exiled high-class individual who could take over the leadership so that when they do regime change, they can install somebody. And of course, with a country that has had now generations, 3 generations of a lineage of dictators, psychologically, it would make sense that a brother might be put in place. So, who murdered him? Maybe North Korea found out about this? I don't know. They started to make moves right after that. So, what were the moves that they made recently that has sparked this off? Well, let's check this out, this missile video.
A new round of North Korean ballistic missile launches triggering anger from Japan on Monday. Pyongyang fired off 4 rockets in the early hours, and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe says 3 of them landed within Japanese waters.
We will not tolerate these launches, which are clearly in violation of Security Council resolutions. We have strongly rebuked North Korea.
According to South Korea, the missiles were launched from the North's facility near the Chinese border and traveled around 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles. Seoul says with that sort of range, it's unlikely they were long-range intercontinental missiles, but that needs to be confirmed. Pyongyang has staged regular test launches in the past year, sparking widespread concern that it could soon develop an ICBM that could reach the United States. North Korea threatened to take, quote, strong retaliatory measures after joint U.S.-South Korean defense drills kicked off last week, an annual event that Pyongyang calls preparation for war. The launch prompted South Korea's acting leader to call for a quick deployment of the controversial U.S. anti-missile system known as THAAD, a move that's become not only a tension point with North Korea, but also China.
So there were some weapon systems that were deployed that are new, and I think that that's really what says that some things have changed. One of the interesting things to note was that some drones with Hellfire missiles were sent over for the first time, sent over to South Korea. Also, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're talking about in terms of these drills. This is from March. This is a U.S. exercises. Yes. U.S., South Korea, Japan start drills off North Korea. This is from Fox43.com. The U.S., Japan, and South Korea sent a pointed message to North Korea on Tuesday, dispatching high-tech missile defense ships to the same area where Pyongyang fired 4 missiles just 8 days ago. Aegis warships from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan began exercises Tuesday to improve their capability to shoot down enemy ballistic missiles, the U.S. Navy said in a statement. The U.S. Navy called the two-day drills, quote, a trilateral mission warning informational link exercise. The exercise will employ tactical data link systems to trade communications, intelligence, and other data among the ships in the exercise, a statement from the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet in Japan said. China's foreign ministry reacted sternly Tuesday afternoon, calling on all sides to end, quote, a vicious cycle that could spiral out of control. Quote, North Korea has violated UN Security Council resolutions, banning its ballistic missile launches. On the other hand, South Korea, the U.S., and now Japan insist on conducting super large-scale military drills, Chinese foreign ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying said. So it's important to understand what because this has gone on with Russia as well, what it means to have anti-missile batteries deployed when you're dealing with a nuclear state. Part of the thing about why nuclear weapons serve as a deterrent has always been the idea of mutually assured destruction. It's the idea that if one side launches a nuclear missile, the other side's going to launch a nuclear missile, but you don't do that because both sides are going to get destroyed. North Korea, in an attempt, I mean, obviously, this is a twisted regime, like worst of the worst. People just starving to death, but that's communism for you. So what have they done? They've gone and they've tried to develop nuclear weapons to stop themselves from getting invaded, to stop regime change, because the idea is if we have nuclear weapons and we can launch them at our main enemies, which for them is South Korea and the U.S. troops stationed there, Japan, who is protected by the U.S., so it's basically the U.S. They'd love to be able to hit the U.S. with missiles, but that's probably unlikely. That the thought is, if we have these nuclear weapons, we won't be invaded. And it's kind of held true. As they've developed these nuclear weapons, they're off the radar, right? Nobody wants to invade them. But as the tech for defending against these, as we can see in this missile graphic here, we'll talk a little bit about what these things are. So you've basically got these warships that can launch missiles. You've got ground missiles that can be launched from South Korea if North Korea's missiles take off, right? And then you've got Patriots that can hit it head on. So there's 3 chances to hit any missile and basically blow it out of the sky. What that means is that it eliminates North Korea's nuclear missile threat per se and turns it into a conventional, you can come back to me, Christian, turns it into a conventional now battle, or the potential that, because I mean, the U.S. has nuclear submarines in the area, the potential that North Korea launches a nuclear missile, it's shot out of the sky, and it's not mutually assured destruction of both, it's just assured destruction of North Korea, because the U.S. launches nukes, a nuclear strike, and it would be justified in that way. So this is a serious situation, and China is an ally, North Korea's only ally. This is a serious situation. Them putting that in place is basically saying, okay, we're calling your bluff, and I think it's time for you to go. Now, those exercises were previously planned, weren't they? They're yearly. You don't just plan to send warships, these advanced warships, and to deploy these things. You've got to plan this months and months and months in advance. But yet, they're acting like it's all brand new. North Korea launches these missiles. Japan, interesting. I think Japan's mindset is going to be a very important part of this whole thing. Let's look at these Japan drills, because I think that the Japanese psychology, especially when it comes to nuclear, is going to be very important here. Remember, you need fear in order to start a war, and it looks like Japan is stoking fear. This is from Reuters. Sirens blare as Japan, fearing North Korea, holds first missile drill. Sirens blared and loudspeakers broadcast warnings in Japan's first civilian missile evacuation drill on Friday, conducted in a fishing town by officials wary about the threat of North Korean missiles. Residents of the largely rural peninsula jutting out into the ocean about 450 kilometers, that's 280 miles north of the capital, Tokyo, made their way to a designated evacuation center equipped with emergency kits and protective gear. School children in another part of town crouched down to the ground before hurrying inside a gymnasium. I've seen missiles flying between foreign countries on television, but I never imagined this would happen to us, said Hideo Motokawa, a 73-year-old who participated in the drill. Now, interesting about this article, there were two quotes. Both of the quotes were from 73-year-olds. I found that notable, that they would specifically pick 73-year-olds. But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Because the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right, which created a nuclear, it put nuclear into a special place in the Japanese psyche. The threat of nuclear, like it's Freudian. These 73-year-olds would have been basically about 1 year old when that happened. So at that point in their life, their early coming up, it would have been particularly seared deeply into their psyche. Their fear of this is unbelievable. It's so real to them, the fear of nuclear destruction. And I think that's particularly the set of people that they're going to use the fear against. I mean, about 73, 70s, this is where your leaders of a country are at. I mean, John McCain's like 80, right? So these are your leaders of the country in Japan, and Japanese have long lifespans compared to other nations. I think they have some of the longest, particularly like in Okinawa and whatnot. They have some of usually the oldest person on Earth, or within the top 10. There's a bunch of Japanese. So these are the people that are afraid, and they're going to stoke this fear. I do believe that. Stoking the fear of a nuclear Korea. But remember, this is how you do it. Don't you remember? We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud, Condoleezza Rice trying to sell the war with Iraq. Don't you recall that? Selling the war with Afghanistan with dirty bombs, terrorists bringing in dirty bombs. This is the same pattern. It's a pattern, and it's a pattern of fear. And showing the school children, just like the propaganda films, the Cold War propaganda films in the US. It's a pattern. It's the same thing. But if you don't pay attention to the pattern, it just runs. So the idea is, let's show the pattern. Why do I believe this is happening? We have this China. We've got Rex Tillerson. This is from what is this? China lashes out. Here we go. This is China's response. China lashes out. This is from CNBC. China lashes out as South Korea puts an American anti-missile system in place. A powerful U.S. anti-missile system designed to protect South Korea is sparking regional anxiety that's begun hitting one of Asia's most important economies. The system, known as the Terminal High Altitude Area Device, or THAAD, is designed to defend South Korea and Japan from missile attack. North Korea and its unpredictable leader, Kim Jong-un, possesses nuclear weapons and makes a habit of regularly threatening neighbors. THAAD, which could be operational as soon as summer 2017, keep that in mind, which could be operational as soon as summer 2017, uses radar to track when a ballistic missile is launched and then intercepts and destroys the missile before it descends onto its target. Christian, I found that particular date to be very interesting. Summer 2017. When would it be likely that something would pop off? End of summer? Beginning of fall? September 11th is technically still summer. Fall doesn't begin until September 21st. So the last time, when I said it feels the same, the last time in 2001, the September 11 attacks happened in summer of 2001, technically.
Wow.
This system is going to be ready summer 2017.
Patterns.
And with that system in place, you would need that system in place before you went ahead and launched an attack, because you'd need to shoot down the North Korean missiles. Very interesting that that's where it's at. And, of course, you also have to make sure that diplomacy fails. You got to try diplomacy, but it's got to fail. We did the same thing with Afghanistan. We did the same thing with Iraq. And here we go, seeing it with North Korea. You got this no patience. So this is from Activist Posts. Rex Tillerson, no strategic patience with North Korea, maybe war. On his way to China, Trump's Secretary of State Rex Tillerson stopped off in South Korea. During a visit to the demilitarized border, Tillerson dissed the Obama administration. He said, it's a policy of, quote, strategic patience has run its course, and all, quote, of the options are on the table. Tillerson said, obviously, if North Korea takes actions that threaten South Korean forces or our own forces, that would be met with an appropriate response. If they elevate the threat of their weapons program to a level that we believe requires action, that option is on the table. So what they're talking about is elevating the threat of their weapons program. That sounds like not letting the smoking gun become a mushroom cloud. And then Trump tweets this week as well. We got this Trump tweet. North Korea's behaving very badly. Badly. They've been playing the United States for years. China has done little to help. So now it's China's fault. North Korea has been playing the United States. Donald Trump says he's ready to quit being played. And it's interesting that also lining up. So you've got South Korea, obviously they have a military. They've got a powerful military, and they have tons of U.S. bases there, right? There's a huge U.S. military presence in South Korea. There's a military presence in Japan, but Japan is not supposed to have their own military. But that's been changing. You say, this takes a lead up. This takes a lead up. Not necessarily conspiracy, but wouldn't Japan be more likely to engage in this sort of behavior if they were wanting to build their military up? By the terms of basically the peace agreement with the United States would defend Japan, Japan would have security forces, but they would not have a military. But this is being relaxed. And it's being relaxed by this war legislation that a lot of people were not paying attention to. It was a big deal in Japan, but now it really makes sense. So we're going to go back 1 year ago. We got this Japan war thing. This is from Japan Times. Security laws usher in new era for pacifist Japan. Marking a historic change in Japan's pacifist post-war defense posture, 2 contentious security laws took effect Tuesday, now remember, this is last year, that will allow Tokyo to exercise its right to collective self-defense without breaking the Constitution. Until now, even though that right is endowed to every nation by the United Nations Charter, the pacifist Constitution was widely considered as banning the option in war-renouncing Article 9, until the Abe administration opted to reinterpret it rather than formally amend it. This is very similar to how executive actions take place in the United States. Many of those opposed to the changes have called the new laws, quote, war legislation. Now this is important, this is last year in Japan Times. They're saying, fearing the nation will either enter or be dragged into military conflicts that are not of its making. The laws are sure to unnerve neighbors like China, which has increasingly been alarmed by the gradual transformation of the self-defense forces, which are poised to play bigger roles in East and Southeast Asia. Now Japan has one of the greatest, and I don't say great in a good way, I say great in large, greatest military traditions, obviously, in the world. The samurai are celebrated. The martial arts, which means martial meaning military. Martial arts, I mean, Japan's history is, their warrior ethos is a part of their culture. And right now they've been demoralized. Fukushima demoralized them. Their economy demoralized them. Pacifist constitution, right? Like the Germans after World War I. They weren't allowed to have a military. Japan, not allowed to have a military until we reinterpret the Constitution. So for the past year, they've been growing their military. They've been growing a military. Does China have a reason to be worried? Has Japan invaded China in the past? Has Japan slaughtered, and I mean slaughtered, millions of Chinese? Of course they have. World War II. China looking out and seeing South Korea poised to perhaps take North Korea, which was the buffer between China and the U.S. Seeing the U.S., seeing Japan rebuilding their military. This is where things go to. This is the pattern. This is the lineup. We had James Corbett on, and he said the target for Trump is going to be China. Is he in on the conspiracy too? We'll have to have him back to ask him. He said this right after the election. He said, yeah, it's not going to be Russia, it's going to be China. It's going to be China. Go back and look at our interview with Corbett back in November, or may have been early December. Bilderberg, is he Bilderberg in it? Is he Illuminati in it? Or does he happen to live in Japan, live in Asia, and is well studied in history and could see a pattern occurring? Isn't that more likely? And then here it is, first 100 days. This is the lineup. Get North Korea out of the way, and then you're on the border of China to really threaten them. To have leverage to start making some deals like Donald Trump is always trying to make a deal with somebody. Right? And now he's got the leverage of the military, something he never had in his business dealings. Right? He couldn't threaten his neighbors with invasion, threaten to invade the guys next door to Trump Tower, or invade City Hall if they didn't give him a permit. So, final thing on this, when it comes to China, Tillerson went to China. We have this Tillerson meeting. From NPR, Rex Tillerson meets with China's president to wrap up his Asia tour. So again, you got to do diplomacy, but diplomacy's got to fail. That's the pattern. You do diplomacy, but diplomacy's got to fail. And I guarantee you, we're also going to see them go to the UN. That's got to happen. We're going to see a shot to the UN, and we're going to probably see a Colin Powell-esque presentation, and it's going to be this guy, Rex Tillerson. Important thing to remember about Rex Tillerson, former Exxon CEO. This dude is way tied in. More tied in than any diplomat. It's a former biggest U.S. oil company CEO. This guy's got the connects at every level, one phone call away. Is he going to be able to sway some people at the UN? Absolutely. Let's go back to the article. Sorry, let's do it. Let's go back to that article there, Tillerson. Rex Tillerson, this is from NPR. Rex Tillerson meets with China's president to wrap up Asia tour. This is from March 19th. Rex Tillerson, this is yesterday. Rex Tillerson concluded his first trip to Asia as Secretary of State, sounding optimistic about the prospects for U.S. cooperation with China on the North Korean nuclear issue. The upbeat notes he struck in Beijing contrasted with his remarks on Friday in Seoul about how all options, including military strikes against North Korea, remain on the table. As if to underline the seriousness of the situation, even as Tillerson was discussing North Korea with his Chinese hosts, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un presided over the test launch of a new rocket engine. Pyongyang called the test, quote, of historic significance, although its capabilities and possible uses are not quite clear. So, Christian, we've got, for me, this is it, bro. All of the patterns are there.
That's exactly what I was thinking as you said it.
Every single one is there. Mm-hmm. Every one.
Yep.
No Illuminati. No Illuminati necessary to see that. Mm-mm. No Bilderberg. My little Moloch. Moloch didn't help me. I didn't sacrifice any goats or anything to Moloch. No, it's just patterns.
Yep.
And the thing is, they do the same thing over and over and over again. And our job now is to be like, yo, we see ya. We see ya. We see where you're going. But let me tell you, back, I was heavily involved in the protest movement back the war in Iraq. The first day that we invaded Iraq, I was at the protest at the Federal Building in Los Angeles, blocking the street, helicopters overhead, cops everywhere. And there was maybe only about 200 to 300 of us. You know what I mean? Headed straight there on my motorcycle with my buddy, went through the cop barricades, the whole nine, so we could get out there. And then I was involved, for years after that. And I got involved in the Green Party. I thought that maybe the political route was the way to go. Our guest Judd Weiss is going to talk to us about his thoughts on that, having been deeply involved in a political party for liberty as well. Mm-hmm. I was a bit of more of a lefty at that point. But that's why I know these patterns, was because I was around it, people talking about it. I was keeping myself up on the news. This is so reminiscent. It's the same thing.
Wow.
And it's this way that you have to, it's a dance.
Yeah.
And it's a dance that states have done. This is not a new dance. Look, this is the beginning of 300.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Where you send the envoy and he says, "You better back down." And he says, "This is Sparta." Yeah. Rex Tillerson was just that envoy going around with the heads.
Yeah.
Right? South Korea has said, "We'll agree." Japan has said, "We'll agree." King Xerxes, he's the envoy of Xerxes. And North Korea's playing Sparta.
It's crazy.
Right? And Athens is China. Mm-hmm. And you know what? North Korea's going to get bombed to shit, just like the 300 got killed. This is history repeating itself. Mm-hmm. This is not new. You watch the movie, but you don't see it when it's actually happening. That's based on a true story. You don't see it when it's actually fucking happening. No Illuminati required. No conspiracy theory. Yeah, there's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy, but it's just the conspiracy of the dance. Because they know where they're trying to go. They know. It's like, yeah, let's go. Let's offer them the deal. We know they're not going to take the deal. I hope they don't take the deal. We know they're not going to take the deal. And you think Donald Trump, the man who did the art of the deal, doesn't know how to do this dance? He wrote the book, literally. It's a dance. Watch the dance. So the question is, what do we do? What do we do? And the answer is not to protest. The answer is not through the state. You're not going to get the state to change the dance, because they haven't changed the dance in thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Thousands of years they've been doing the dance. They're not changing the dance. We've got to find the other solutions, and the solutions are here. It's to get outside of the state. It's to stop contributing to them, because you're paying for them to do the dance. If they don't have the money to do the dance, if they don't have the money for the weapon systems, if they don't have the money to send Rex Tillerson around. Because you remember in 300, remember how the envoy was dressed? He had gold flowing.
Looks familiar.
Take the money away. Mm-hmm. Take the money away. Those are the types of solutions that we're going to talk about. And actually, why don't you go ahead and throw up counter markets right now? And while you're doing that, while I talk to these people about counter markets, because those are now we can talk about the solutions. Why don't you get Judd Weiss fired up, and then once you've got him, we'll go to break. But first, counter markets. So for those of you who don't know, Activist Post and also we over here at the Vin Armani Show have launched a brand new newsletter, Agorist Libertarian Counter Markets, Trends and Strategies for Maximum Freedom at countermarkets.com. So today's episode is being brought to you by that. If you go, you can get your first issue, which is this month. It's brand new. Chock full of information. It's about 50 pages this month. We're covering cryptocurrency, agorism, libertarianism. We're talking about how to end or limit the power of the state and make a profit doing it. You want to live by your libertarian principles in a non-violent way. You want to really support voluntarism? You want to really live it? People who live it, like myself, like Christian, like the people at Activist Post, we've taken our knowledge and brought in the knowledge of so many others, people who have been on the show, others whose names you probably know, to contribute as well. Big on cryptocurrency. This month we're talking about automation. We're talking about cryptocurrency. We've got charts on that. We've got a whole cryptocurrency report. Also, this month, speaking about solutions and why now is the time to do it, part of that is being able to provide for yourself. Now, whether that is through self-sufficiency, whether that is through having your own business, they're kind of all a part of the same whole. And this month, my article is why there's never been a better time to be self-employed. And there hasn't, and it makes a huge difference in terms of being able to provide for yourself and then live by libertarian principles. So go and get your first issue, countermarkets.com, and sign up. You'll get your first issue for free this month, which is this issue. And you know what? I think it's a great product, and there's a ton of useful information. It'll take you a while to get through, so it's definitely worth it. We're just happy to give the value to you because these are the solutions. We're really looking for solutions. We see the problem, but we're looking for solutions, and when we start to find them, we bring them to you. Also, there's a Facebook group associated with this whole thing. It's a private Facebook group for those of you who do decide that you want to sign up and become subscribers, where only subscribers and experts are able to get together. You get like your own little mastermind group to help you walk through this process. So countermarkets.com, go check it out. Get your first month for free, this first premiere issue. So we are going to go to break, and then we will be back with our guest, Judd Weiss. Let's go to break, Christian. Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani. Also on Twitter and Periscope at Vin Armani is my handle there. And of course, we are streaming on the Facebook page of our content partner. That is Activist Post, facebook.com/Activist Post. Now, I usually intro our guests, but I think in the case of this guest, I'll let him intro himself with this video. Let's go ahead and play this, and then we'll go straight over to our guest, Judd Weiss.
Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. They have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. Not the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do.
Judd Weiss is a commercial real estate broker and VP of sales at M-Rad Architecture. He is widely known in the liberty scene for his photography, capturing moments in recent libertarian history from around the globe. Judd was John McAfee's running mate in the 2016 campaign for the Libertarian Party nomination for U.S. presidential candidate. Judd Weiss, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
I'm really honored to be here, Vin. I love your show.
Thank you, thank you. I am glad to have you on as well, and that I've seen that video now probably at least a dozen times, and every single time I get goosebumps. and I remember it's very emotional. I'm sure a lot of viewers out there. We'll talk about that video. You edited that as well as some others for the campaign. You and I got connected by our mutual friend and friend of the show, who's been on several times, Peter Kallman. We started talking about what we could potentially discuss on the show, and then we ran into each other at an Acapulco where we were both speaking and ended up having what I thought was an amazing conversation. And I am glad that you're able to come on so we could kind of repeat and have that conversation here, because there was a whole bunch of good stuff in there. The first thing that I want to discuss with you is, obviously, I want to talk about John McAfee, of course. I'm a hacker, software developer, so I think maybe that's a good jumping off point. So you ended up as John McAfee's running mate. He was running to be candidate of the Libertarian Party. Can you tell us sort of how that came about, and then we'll backtrack through your history, but how did you come to meet John McAfee, and then how was it sort of decided that you would run with him?
Well, I'm just a John McAfee fan. I love the guy, and I've been paying attention to him over the years. I've been following his antics. Really, he caught on my radar after the whole Belize situation, and the guy is just hilarious, and so I love the guy. And when he was announcing himself as if he was running for president on the Cyber Party, I started posting about it just because I thought that was pretty badass. Not even that I was going to support the Cyber Party, whatever that was. I didn't even know what it was. I just thought that was pretty cool. Then when he announced, and he seemed like he was pretty much libertarian in pretty much everything he was saying. So I was hoping that he would come on board the Libertarian Party, and sure enough, he did. And in connection with some of my friends in the party, and somebody I knew who became John McAfee's campaign manager was a friend of mine, and hit me up and asked me if I would host a fundraiser for McAfee. I'm a McAfee fan, so I said, hell yeah, that's exciting. Hell yeah, I'd be happy to do it. And then over the course of talking to him about setting up that fundraiser, the idea came up for me to run with McAfee, which blew my mind, because I'm, I don't really have any political ambitions. I'm not really interested in being a politician or even having public office. But that blew my mind. It just seemed so exciting. I have a different vision for what I want to do in the political space, in the liberty movement. I have my own sensibilities. I think that a lot of the liberty movement has been focused on the ideas, but the packaging hasn't been so great. And so I've taken a lot of photos, and I'm trying to improve the image of the scene. And I think I've had a pretty good impact. And so, and well, to that extent, there's actually more than 25,000, maybe even 30,000 Facebook profile photos that are mine out there at this point. So I've had a ton of recognition. That wasn't all in the liberty scene, but throughout the liberty scene, there's tons of black and white photos of libertarians. It's kind of my trademark all over Facebook.
I think we probably we've got some of these, since we're talking about the photos now, just to give people an idea. Christian, if you want to pop on these photos, if you got that photo link, there we go. Yeah, and obviously some people that we recognize. Peter Schiff there with his wife.
Sure.
You can go ahead and narrate these if you, or if you want to just while these are in the background, if you want to just continue talking about your sort of why you decided to. You've taken these pictures over the years. What made you decide to do this?
Well, I was just taking photos of people in my life, and that's McAfee and his wife. I just tried to. I was just using my camera originally as like a glorified point and shoot.
Adam Kokesh, obviously.
That's Adam Kokesh. And I was just pretty, like, I'm OCD. I just, whenever I get into something, I go like maybe too far down the rabbit hole. And I did that with photography. I didn't even mean to make it this big a part of my life. But I started getting better and better with photography, and people were flipping out just around me in LA. And then as I started going to Liberty events, I was just shooting people around me, and then everybody made it their profile pictures, and people started asking me if I would come out to these conference organizers would ask me if I would come out to their events, and then they would just like fly me out, and everybody wanted me at every single event all of a sudden. And that's where I'm at now. Everybody, whether they're hosting whatever it is, even if it's just like a local libertarian meetup at IHOP, they want me there because everybody wants me to capture their event. And so now I'm just choosing the more international events. I've been flying around. But nevertheless, I've shot so many events around the scene that my name is on so many profile photos already out there, which gives me a lot of recognition. And McAfee, while he's an interesting and dynamic character, he doesn't have a lot of cred in the scene. He hasn't been around the liberty scene. He's lived the libertarian lifestyle for forever, since he was young. But Gary Johnson, he's not that dynamic of a character, but he's got a lot of cred in the scene. And the idea was that I've got some cool sensibilities, and nobody doubts my credibility in the scene. And so they thought to have me on board, and blew my mind. And then it was like it was kind of like a band came into town, and they're going on tour on Europe, and I can jump on the bus or not. So I jumped.
So, you know, it's interesting because you are, and I don't know that anybody else. You're one of the people that I've spoken to who definitely uses the term liberty scene, which I think is great and descriptive of sort of making the liberty movement is huge. Obviously, we know that, but I think to make that distinction of the liberty scene, who are a lot of those faces that we saw, the people who are kind of the public face of the movement, and it's interesting that those individuals tend to be the voice of what's happening. You know what I mean? And that there are enough points where they all get together. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between, because obviously you have, with the Democrats and Republicans, you have, I guess Republicans would maybe be the prime sort of analog to it, where you have your Republican Party, and then you certainly have the conservative scene, right? But most of those conservatives are also Republicans. But in this case, we've got the Libertarian Party, but then we have the liberty scene, but yet a very small percentage of those people are registered libertarians. Can you talk to us about how you sort of see the difference in that dynamic, or what's the relationship between the Libertarian Party for you and the liberty scene?
The Libertarian Party is just a small piece of the wider liberty movement. So the liberty movement is vast, it's growing, and the Libertarian Party is struggling hard to get more and more of the wider liberty movement to be a part of it. And I have lots to say about the Libertarian Party itself, but let's just leave it at that for right now, and I'll get back to it. But what we were saying before was, I feel like our ideas are great. I feel like we've got the best ideas, but the imaging, the packaging, the presentation is not just lacking. I think we fail in that department. We look like the socially awkward nerds that people want to avoid. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to help us be at a point where it's like people are thinking, not that that's an event that I want to avoid, but how do I get into that? How do I get involved in that? Mm-hmm. And I think you in particular are doing a phenomenal job of being a great face. You're a better presenter than I am. I'm not even pretending to be a great orator or speaker, but you're fantastic. And I'm trying to push more and more people to focus on their presentation, their ability to communicate and whatnot. And my skill set, I think I've got great sensibilities for imaging. So my photography has been pretty strong. And then entirely new are those videos. I never dabbled in video ever before I got onto the campaign. So while I'm thrown into that, I picked up an entirely new skill set I've never had before. And that Vote Different ad that you played, that was the first time I ever edited video in my life. I installed the video editing app just to edit that because I had a vision for something, and all I knew was in Adobe Premiere, C is the cut tool, V is select tool, and I knew nothing else, nothing. And it made that video.
It's awesome.
And so it just shows, I ignored all the buttons on the screen and all the knobs. So it just shows that you can just make a whole thing like that with just C and V on the keyboard as shortcuts, and that's it.
And also, and I think that it says a lot. And one of the things that it says is that, and it's something that we try to really push here at the show, and certainly with Activist Post as well. Like, one of the things that's the most important to us, and it was my talk about in Acapulco as well, is the idea that we need to just do it. Like, if you think something should be done, that it's just do it. Like, maybe you don't get it right, but you're not, I mean, that was your first shot. You got it right. I mean, they say beginner's luck. You got it. You nailed it first shot, right? Not everybody's going to do that, but you also have a great aesthetic sensibility that you had been working on for a long time. But I'm sure that the first time you picked up that camera, that you didn't get it right. You know what I mean? So this is, I want to talk a little bit about how this, because I think that this is a good jumping off point. I want to talk about how you first decided to do these videos, why you felt, because clearly it's a very different ad than what most political ads look like. But I think that as a libertarian myself, it resonates with me. You know what I mean? A small L libertarian. It resonates with me that it's like, yeah, this is what I believe. Why did you think that, or what made you think that this would be a great addition to the campaign? And can you talk to me about what the comments were from the people within the Libertarian Party upon seeing this type of messaging?
Oh, sure. Okay. So how this came to mind, there was 4 videos that I made during the campaign, and then there was 2 videos that I put out afterwards that were related to the campaign. I just had these, I wrote down 30 ideas for campaign videos, and I've only made now 6 of them, and I have more. I have like vague concepts for even more. When I came on board, I was so excited. My heart was pounding, and I was just I started writing a whole bunch of notes about what I could possibly do with this. And the first most important thing was just to ignore however things have been done in politics before, because I just got an opportunity to be a VP candidate on a presidential campaign with a maniac like John McAfee, right? So this is not the time for me to be a normal, boring politician that I'm like nauseated by. That's not going to happen. Now I'm going to do whatever is the coolest, most badass thing I could possibly do. And it was so exciting. I couldn't have done any of these things, let's say, if I was running with Gary Johnson or even with Austin. You know, Austin's got his own thing. But McAfee, he's so out there that it really gave me plenty of space to do whatever I wanted. And this was my voice. This was what I was contributing to the campaign. And so I was, honestly, it was marijuana. I was smoking weed and coming up with ideas. And
how very libertarian of you.
and the thing about marijuana is that it allows you to kind of feel a little bit more connected to, let's say, your impulses.
Right.
Because if I can follow the path that's pulling on me harder, then I can show people something that will pull at them a little bit harder. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot. Yeah, you're following what resonates with you, and what resonates with you is likely going to resonate with others because you have good taste.
That's right. So I specifically didn't do anything with like focus groups. Can you imagine if like people voted on all the elements of the videos? What a bunch of junk it would be.
Yeah, no, this was my biggest problem with. I said earlier, I don't know if you were on, but back in the early 2000s, sort of as the Iraq War cracked off, I became heavily involved with the Green Party, and I actually ended up being elected the fundraising chairman for Los Angeles County Green Party at that time, and it was big because the anti-war people were all involved in it. But one of the most frustrating things with the Green Party is that everything is done by consensus. So that means it has to be a unanimous vote to let anything move. And I basically quit because nothing got done, and the only things that got done were so milquetoast. Because you had people in there who were in there and who just did not agree with anything. So yeah, man, it's freedom again, right? Let life live.
So I came up with that when I was stoned. The Let Life Live slogan, the first video concept. I had an editor edit the very first video, the one with the photos flashing by. That was why I installed the video editing app in the first place, because he gave me the project file and then I slipped in my own photos. So I needed a video editing app. So I installed one. Then I told my campaign team, I've got this awesome idea for a video. It's going to be the best political ad anyone has ever seen. But I just installed the video editing app and I needed to figure out what the hell I'm doing with it. So bear with me. And then that's when the Vote Different video came out, because I was like, that Here's to the Crazy Ones poem from Steve Jobs for the Apple Think Different ad is just so perfect to have one, McAfee to advertise the scene, and two, to advertise McAfee with it. So these ads, all of these ads were meant as ads for the liberty cause and the movement. We didn't intentionally, we did not speak about ourselves, and we didn't even speak about the party. The Libertarian Party was not mentioned in those ads at all. Those were ads for the movement. You could just take out the title card at the end and put any organization you wanted next to it. And in fact, they've remixed a few of these ads for other organizations, which I encourage. I'm like, please use my content for whatever you want. I don't care. I found that stuff on YouTube anyway.
Right.
I made Vote Different ad for exactly $0. I just found all that stuff on YouTube. And so I encourage people to use it, and they've been using it. SFL, Students for Liberty, has like a new really cool ad where it's basically a remix of the Vote Different ad. There's a Brazilian conference that advertised with a remix of that Vote Different ad. So I'm glad to see it's resonating. Like, there's marijuana in a presidential ad.
Right.
I pushed the bar a little bit for liberty messaging, and now SFL, Students for Liberty, never had weed in one of their videos and advertisements. They had like talks and stuff, and now they're having a little bit more edge. So I'm happy to see that.
So let's talk about what the response obviously within the liberty movement. People clearly love these videos. I mean, you watch it and it's like, yeah, the aesthetic is just brilliant. If you're a believer in freedom, yeah, that's it. It's there. Talk to me about what the response was like, both public and private, from the people in the Libertarian Party, particularly those who maybe did not support or were not supporters of McAfee in particular, and were maybe supporters of Gary Johnson.
A lot of Gary Johnson supporters actually shared that video. People were flipping out. They just loved it. It was like people were saying this was the best marketing anyone has ever seen for the Libertarian Party. And then on the other side, there were a bunch of Gary Johnson supporters that just will attack anything, and they were attacking that video. But there was a lot of libertarians that were upset about that space shuttle at the end of it, and I really think it's a really important point here that libertarians need to imagine they're not libertarians when they look at advertising to people that are not libertarians. So libertarians see a space shuttle, they see taxes, they're like, that's not a libertarian message. And there's validity to that. I was looking for SpaceX stuff because I wanted that symbolism there. But anybody who's not a libertarian will just see the symbolism. They don't think about taxes and NASA program and whatnot. They just see, it was just such beautiful footage. I couldn't use what I had from SpaceX. Like, I needed to use that. And in that symbolism of, like, let life rise and move beyond the clouds, let us be different and separate and go off and do great things. That was kind of the symbolism there. And I feel like this is one of those rare examples where intellectuals see less than the average people.
That's a really good point. You know, one of the things about, obviously, the entrenched political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, is that they're incredibly navel-gazing, right? But I think the people within who are strategists see that all the time, right? They're constantly like, how do we reach out to independents? How do we reach out to independents? How do we reach people who aren't Democrats? How do we reach people who aren't Republicans? It would seem, if you're the Libertarian Party and you basically have free will to do whatever, because it's not like you have anything to lose, right? It's not like you're going to lose seats in the House, you're not going to lose seats in the Senate, you're not going to lose the presidency. It would seem like you have all the freedom in the world to not navel gaze. And yet, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about the Libertarian Party falling into those same, or if you see it that way, is the Libertarian Party falling back into the same things that the Democrats and Republicans, being established and powerful parties, fall into?
Yeah, so the Libertarians, I think what it is there's a major self-esteem problem. They look at the Republicans and Democrats with their established power and influence, and Libertarians really, the Libertarian Party in the last several decades has virtually no victories and pretty much nothing to show for itself. And so they're trying really hard to figure out a solution here on how to actually become relevant for once in history. And here we had some amazing golden opportunity. What's going on in the Libertarian Party is that there's this massive war between the moderates and the purists. They're constantly fighting. People want to be more moderate to connect with the average voter, and a lot of people are like, we want a real hardcore libertarian. And my problem is, I think that either way, whoever wins that battle of moderates versus purists, neither side has anything positive that could possibly result from that, from either way, because the purists are. They're basically like reciting the Liberty Engineer Manual as their outreach. So everything has to be perfectly in line with their sensibilities, otherwise they're going to attack it viciously, and they do, and they're hardcore if something isn't totally in line with the way they want it. And there's people that come up, I'm from the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party, and they always smack my head when I hear that. It's so annoying. It's just divisive and aggravating. So they're like the purists. Then there's the moderates who they're focused on outreach. They want to connect to people, but their whole method is just total junk. They're trying to, it's as if the salesmen of the movement are going back to the engineers and telling them to design a weaker, lamer product so that we can sell more of it, which is crap. So nobody really wants it. So I say this analogy sometimes. If there's two spreads on the market, a cream cheese and a butter, what good does a third option of blend or butter have on the market? Who wants that? And that's what I feel like libertarians aren't realizing. A lot of the libertarians, they feel like, well, we want to show people we're just like them and what they're already comfortable with. Well, if they're already comfortable with something, then they're not interested in us, because what's the point of being establishment without any established power?
Right.
What value does that offer anybody?
We need to be a third option.
We need to be something distinctly different, and we need to just sell liberty, but sell it well, package it well, focus on on connecting to people who are not us. So all the videos that I've done are completely different from each other because I wanted to show it's not just one way, and it's not just my sensibilities. I want people to think there's many ways to do this, many ways to communicate. And that's what I was trying to get across with this. But sell a distinctly different option.
So do you think that it's fundamentally in the outreach? Do you think that if the outreach, first, I guess two questions. First, do you think that this party dynamic that you've described will enable a different type of aesthetic to rise, a different style of outreach like what you're trying to promote to rise? And then I guess the second question is, do you feel like if that was allowed to rise, that would be enough, perhaps, to get people elected in a way that is not happening now?
Yeah, no, I do. Well, about getting people elected, we might be a little bit far off there. And I don't know if the Libertarian Party or the Republican Party or another way is a better vehicle for that. But what I was focused on is, well, yes, I do think that we need to focus on our sales. So I like to say that I think that the problem with the Liberty movement is that we're basically a bunch of engineers dominating the sales department. And there's two different skill sets. One, engineers need to focus on their product, and salesmen need to focus on people. It's a very different, we believe in division of labor, it's a very different skill set. So right now we have, I think we're an A+ in our ideas. I think our engineering is good. There's definitely a time and a place for people to hash out technicalities, but that's not on the showroom floor. And right now we're opening with attacking each other on minutia detail. So I look at the Liberty scene as not everybody's arrow is completely aligned with me or with each other, but as long as our arrows are pointing in pretty much the same direction and we're moving in the same general direction, then I'm a helpful supporter. I do whatever I can to help out, even if people are not completely on message with me. In fact, almost nobody is completely on message with me, and that's totally fine. I still want to be helpful, because sometimes it's not the advanced theoretical mathematician that should be teaching basic algebra. Sometimes it's somebody that's not even calculus level that can just teach basic algebra better. And right now, we need to be able to communicate basic algebra, and we're starting with we're trying to introduce ourselves with a full dissertation on politics and philosophy, and it's like we're throwing 1,200-page novels at people and human action and a whole bunch of books, when I just really wanted to come up with a very simple, clean message. And if we could do that, if we can get a message that's simple, that's digestible, that's compelling, and it resonates, yes, I think we can be very effective. Now, on your second point about whether this is going to help libertarians win elections, ultimately, that would be nice. But I really hope that the Libertarian Party switches their priorities and stops focusing on winning elections. Just please, God, stop it. It's not a mandate. It's not even an attempt. There's no focus on winning elections anymore, because that's distracting us. It's causing us to be lame, uninteresting, and we're focused on the wrong thing. What we need to be focused on is building our movement, growing the liberty protest. And that's what ultimately can translate into winning elections. But right now we have no hope, pretty much. We're way too far off. If we can focus on building and growing, being exciting, being interesting, then down the line we can finally be relevant. But right now, I think the focus on winning elections when we don't have a base that can actually win an election is just keeping us irrelevant. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense to me. One thing that comes to my mind when you're talking about being interesting is when we were at Anarchapulco, and the shots and the video of you giving your speech, and the videos are playing, and to the side, Mir One, who's been one of my favorite artists. I mean, I'm from LA, so since back in probably late 90s when he used to do the back covers of every herb magazine, you know what I mean, a URB magazine. I've been a huge fan. He did 2 giant pieces that were just outstanding and were the backdrop for everybody's speech on that main stage. And it's interesting, I was thinking to myself throughout the whole event, how much different the entire energy of that whole thing would have been had those two pieces not been there. Or had it just been like, I mean, it could have just been like the Anarchapulco logo, right? But it would have been so different. And he was just, you know, I got a chance to talk to him kind of the last night that I was there. We spent a few hours together just shooting the shit at the bar. And, you know, he was saying that he's just coming to these ideas. He was glad to be there. You know, he was glad to do this work. You know, it meant something to him. And we talked a lot about, you know, and earlier in the show, we were talking about, would Obama have been elected and would he have been as exciting as he was had Shepard Fairey not done the Hope and Change posters in the first election, right? Iconic. You know what I mean? So, and then it won like best brand or something, brand Obama. It won like the best brand in Forbes or something like that. I'm wondering, obviously, artists coming in make a difference. Look at the difference that like your vision, and like you say, you just passionate, not spending money, not doing these things, same sort of situation. It didn't cost Shepard Fairey, I mean, I know he was commissioned and got paid, but it's not like it cost him any money to make those things. This is what he does, you know, but it makes such a huge impact. How do we, as the Liberty Movement, clearly, artists are huge libertarians by nature, right? I mean, most artists that you meet are all about just having the freedom to do shit, especially those who are more avant-garde and out there. What are we missing that this scene, that this movement isn't chock full of artists who are doing the things that you are doing? What is missing?
That's a very strong topic, and it even deserves its own podcast. If you look at like the conservative movement, there's a serious lack of artists there. If you look at the left, that's where they all are. There's incredible artists. So for photography, as far as photography is concerned, in the libertarian universe or the wider liberty scene, I think I'm the best. Even if you widen it to the conservative thing, I still am. But if you go into the left, there's no fucking way. These people on the left, they're so talented. There's such incredible skill set there. It's because there's such a lack of talent and artistic ability on the right. I think some of it has to do with the ideas, is that the idea of being conservative is like the death of an artist, because an artist needs to explore. An artist needs to, they're not doing anything if they're just conserving the old values and the ways that things have been. That's not interesting art. Art has to be exploratory, and I think the left and libertarians give artists that kind of flexibility, whereas the right, I think, is just too restrictive, which has stifled their artistic scene, in my opinion. I mean, I have some strong thoughts on that. I feel like the liberty scene hasn't done a good enough job of bringing in artists, because right now it's primarily an intellectual movement, and there's good reason why, and we need to now allow ourselves to communicate to the 95% of the public that aren't considering themselves intellectuals, that focus on other things. And we need to be more tolerant of those people. So right now, in the liberty movement, like intellectuals, if somebody's off like on one issue, they get hammered. There's like a 3-page article by their friend hammering them on that one issue that they deviated on. We really need to broaden our horizons and be a bigger tent. And allow for more differences, as long as we're pretty much pointing in the same direction. We're not doing a great job of that. So I think that's part of it. But yes, absolutely, I consider art and our ability to explore and bring in cool visual concepts to be a really critical thing. And I'd like to be helping that. And I don't have an art background. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I've got a business background. I sell buildings. I deal with really stubborn bastards with a lot of money, trying to get them to work together. So the photography thing is, I'm still relatively new in that, even though I've gone really far down the rabbit hole. The video thing, I'm totally new. People are calling me a marketing guru now, and I don't have any marketing background. I don't have any experience, but I see that the liberty scene, throughout the liberty scene, there definitely isn't any of that. It's just crap. The video, the photos, the way we've been presenting ourselves is really uninteresting and boring, and it's not drawing that crowd. So I wanted, with our campaign, to go after, in a big way, the Bernie crowd, which I felt like we could do. We can't get the hard economic left. That's off limits. That's not possible. But the artists, the Burning Man festival community, they're not hardcore economic left, or a lot of them aren't. They just don't like these crazy religious people telling them what to do. They're looking for another way, and they were all annoyed with Hillary, and they were desperately looking for another option. And then what we gave them was something boring and establishment. So all I wanted with this campaign, if it wasn't McAfee and I was just hoping, please God, can we have a cool option for once in libertarian history? That's all I wanted.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Those of us, and you are right that there has been. I think we do try to explain in intellectual terms, right? I think those of us who understand different economic and political philosophies clearly understand that most of the people who are Bernie Sanders supporters would be very, very, like you talk about the Burning Man crowd. So many of the burners that I know, the vast majority of them are business people, right? They're successful. That's how they're able to stay out at Burning Man and have a great time. They'd be very, very unhappy personally if Bernie Sanders got his way on a lot of things. Yeah. But yet, in order to explain why that's the case, you know, we often will default to, go read Rothbard, and like, we're going to take them down the road of Austrian economics, and why actually, you know, more people will be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they clearly don't even require that from Bernie. You're so right, because if Bernie actually explained himself, if he could, I'm not sure that he actually can, but like if he actually explained what he's trying to do economically, they wouldn't even be happy with him. So what I'm wondering is, when you see the scene from an aesthetic standpoint, let's forget about anything else. What is and what resonates? What is the aesthetic that sticks out to you? If you can put it into words, I know you can do it just by looking through the camera and by editing. If you could put it into words, what is the aesthetic of liberty today?
I don't know if there's an aesthetic to liberty. I have my own sensibilities, and well, there is a little bit. Like liberty, what's the point of liberty? Liberty is to release us from these chains that have been holding us back, so we can realize our potential and become something great. So there is a sense where my photography is trying to show us in a really strong light, in a light that is that shows that when I have my camera and I'm pointing it at people, I'm bringing people into my universe. And my universe, my sensibilities are stronger. I want people to not look like they're weird and awkward and uncomfortable. I want people to look like just competent, stronger, expressive, somewhat heroic. So I think that liberty could have an aesthetic in that direction, or I'd like it to be. Unfortunately, if I was going to poll most of the students and ask what kind of photos they want, they generally want more goofy, like photobombing crap. And I refuse to like shoot that stuff. Like when anybody makes like a stupid face in my camera, and these nerds do that sometimes, I just put my camera down and tell them to knock it off, because I want them to look good. It's like, help me help you, not to look like an idiot. So that's what I've been focusing on. I think that I would like to see a bigger shift away from that goofball style, because while a lot of these nerds think that's totally awesome to have your tongue sticking out and photobombing, that's showing people that this is a bunch of socially awkward nerds that you don't want to be a part of. And so I've definitely done something different. In fact, pretty much all of our messaging in the liberty movement that's not serious is always goofy. But we haven't done a great job of doing something beautiful, something that's really kind of more inspiring. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the table, because the left does do that. I mean, Avatar was beautiful about environmentalism and colonialism, and those themes were presented really beautifully. We're not doing that. Whenever we present themes and we're not being serious about it, we're goofy. Or if we're not being technical, we're goofy. So I really want to bring that in. And we could have gotten these Bernie supporters, like I said, we were focused on being, the festival artists community. We could have really gotten them. And when they looked at the libertarian option this election, they're like, that's lame, screw that. They weren't interested. And it was just such a shame because they were desperately looking for another option. And I feel like people say everybody's a libertarian, and I don't think that that's true. I don't think that's true at all. But I do feel like everybody is a libertarian about themselves. They always feel like I should be able to do whatever I want, but unfortunately, a lot of people think that they know what's best for others. But they don't like when others tell them what to do when they don't want to do that. So I really wanted to get that point across, that we need to be respectful of others in order to be able to do what we want to do. We need to release ourselves from our chains in order to achieve something of greater potential. That was subtly communicated in that Vote Different ad. It was really about if the way things have been done is crap and we don't like this and we're tired of this, then we need to do something different. And it's not the people that are voting different that are the weird runts that we want to ignore. The ones that are doing things different are often the heroes, the leaders, the people moving the world forward in really important and interesting ways. So I wanted that to come across. And that was what that Vote Different ad was about.
So one thing, talking about heroes and you presenting the people in the movement and in the scene in a positive light, in doing so, I mean, you get a chance to meet a lot of people. You get a chance to travel to a lot of events. It's something that you've made a part of your life. So you, as a good resource, for those people who want to, and I advise, by the way, everybody to, if you are into this, that you are really served, although the internet's a great place, communicating online is a great place, you're really served by meeting people and interacting with people in the flesh who believe in the principles that you believe in. For those people who are sort of starting out in this movement, who feel these principles, want to take it a bit farther, want to be able to interact with people, what are the events either around the country or around the world that as you've traveled around where you've really felt like, okay, this is powerful, this is one that I want to be sure that I'm attending every year, etc. Which events would you suggest to somebody who's just starting out to go and check out?
Sure. I've seen the entire Liberty scene, or so much of it. I don't think that there's anybody that's crossed behind enemy lines of all the different factions in the movement quite like I have. I've really been everywhere because they fly me out to everything. I think that one of the most fun events of the year is the Students for Liberty International Conference in DC. I would highly recommend that one. That's really cool. There's tons of students. They have, somewhere about 1,500 to 2,000 attendees. It's big, but it's really cool. I'd say the highest end, the nicest, is probably the Atlas Network, Liberty Forum, and Freedom Dinner, because there's an Atlas Society which is focused on Atlas Shrugged and Ayn Rand. Then there's Atlas Network, which is nothing to do with Ayn Rand. It's specifically Atlas like the globe, and they are focused on helping out liberty events around the world. So not only do you get to meet a really cool international dynamic, like a selection of people from all over the world. It's amazing. But that's like a super luxury in the liberty donor scene, to be donating to causes outside of your own country. So they get a really nice high-end kind of event and clientele and donor base. Probably the biggest event is Freedom Fest in Vegas. And I think Freedom Fest is a great introduction because everybody is there. You meet tons of people. There's like 2,500 to 3,000 attendees a year. It's the biggest one by far. There's a lot of older conservatives there as well, but there's so many people that there's more than enough cool younger crowd that you have more than enough people to meet. It's awesome. So I think probably a good introduction if you're going to come to a national conference is Freedom Fest. Otherwise, I don't know, stop by one of your local Students for Liberty regional conference or Young Americans for Liberty regional event. those are all really cool. And you meet a bunch of, it's really inspiring to see the young activists. The young activists have their shit together a lot more than the older crowd. The older crowd are like stodgy and like kind of schlubby, and a lot of them dress in like flip-flops and oversized white t-shirts with pizza stains. They're just like these like intellectuals that are professional intellectuals. But the younger crowd, they dress well, they're cool, they're diverse, they're interesting, they're well-spoken, they understand these ideas really well. It's really inspiring to see. So I would highly recommend people give a lot more attention to the younger crowd. Now, there's a ton of organizations throughout the scene, all focusing on different causes or slightly different variations of the cause. You know, some people are focused on justice reform, like promoting drug reform, younger activists on college campuses. There's Mises Institute, there's Atlas Society, there's a whole bunch of different organizations. The Libertarian Party is just one. You know, there's a bunch of think tanks like Cato, and anyway, there's so many. Now, what I want you to understand, to give you a really good understanding of why the Libertarian Party has such a massive problem, and I don't think it's ever been explained this way. But imagine all those different organizations around the liberty movement, and there's so many of them. There's hundreds of them, and they all have their own subtle difference in focus. And sometimes they have their own camps, like Mises Institute fights with Cato, and Ayn Rand Institute fights with Atlas Society. They fight with everybody, actually. But a lot of them are overlapping, and they all have their kind of different focus. Now imagine if that wider liberty scene that is roughly millions of people had suddenly all of those organizations were removed, they didn't exist, and they were replaced with just one organization. And in order to decide the direction of that one organization that encompassed the whole liberty movement, people had to vote. And then it would be decided that's our face, that's how it's going to be represented. Can you imagine the utter warfare that would result from that?
Yeah, right? People not having. Well, that's not very libertarian, is it?
Right. Well, that's the Libertarian Party.
Right. So it's got an inherent contradiction inside of it in a way.
I don't know if I would call it a contradiction, but because it's. Well, in a way, yes, there are contradictions. It's a political party and it has to operate like a political party.
Sure.
But if there's little scuffles and fights throughout the liberty scene, as a lot of these intellectuals argue with each other, but they're relatively minor. They're not catastrophic. But in the Libertarian Party, it's only going to be one direction. We're either going to go with an establishment moderate voice, or we're going to go with a radical voice. There's probably 17 warring factions in the Libertarian Party, depending on how you want to split that up.
But it sounds like there's a lot of hope, though, for the future, because it sounds like what you're saying is that this younger generation that you're seeing coming up, it sounds like they're a new breed and kind of a new voice. I mean, do you think that there's hope for the Libertarian Party, or do you think that this younger generation is going in their own direction that may not be party politics? What's your thought on that?
Oh, there's a lot of hope because of this younger generation. The younger generation is so impressive, so inspiring, so I'm really excited about that. The Libertarian Party, I don't know if there's any hope for it. Not the way it's structured right now. The Libertarian Party has resources. It has people, it has some money, and it has 50-state ballot access. So what that gives us is a platform. And it doesn't give us an ability to win any elections. But it does give us a platform that we can speak from. So I want us to use that as a platform for the cause. The problem with the Libertarian Party is, like I just said, internally it can only focus in, let's say, one direction, whatever the majority voted for. So what that means is that these little intellectual scuffles and some simple bickering becomes outright hostile warfare within the Libertarian Party. People are vicious, angry, they're attacking each other, and that's not effective activism. That's going to keep us useless. If our brains are distracted fighting each other, then I don't see how we could possibly achieve anything with that Libertarian Party. I think that the Libertarian Party has a lot of promise, but it would have to be, it's not anything to do with the people involved. It would have to be structured differently because it's a structural problem. The leadership, I have no issues with whatsoever. In fact, I think that the current chairman of the LP, Nick Sarwark, is awesome. I think he's fantastic. And it's not because he's moving the Libertarian Party forward in a really important way. I don't think he is. I don't even think that that's possible because of all the infighting. But what he is fantastic at is managing the infighting pretty well. He's able to keep the peace pretty well. It's not a good analogy, but let's say Saddam Hussein wasn't great, but getting rid of him led to a lot of problems.
Right, sure. I understand what you're saying.
And that's how I think about the Libertarian Party. Getting rid of Nick would lead to a lot of problems. I don't think he can move the Libertarian Party forward in an important way because of all of the fighting. It's not my issue is not with the leadership. It's not even with the current LP member base. It's just with the fact that structurally you have to faction up and fight with each other in order to get your way. And so that leads us into really long-lasting anger and hostility. In fact, and not only that, think of it this way. All of us in this political world are nerds. We're all nerds.
Sure.
If we're into politics, we cross that nerd threshold.
Sure.
And among the world of nerds, there's cooler nerds and there's the not cool nerds.
Sure. Sure.
And the Libertarian Party is a very tight, exclusive membership club for the not cool nerds. That's the problem. And it has to be that way.
Right.
Because these are the people that are willing to fight with each other. Because other people in the scene, cooler nerds or people that are involved in politics, they want their activism to be productive. They don't want to fight on their free time when they're doing their activism. But these guys that are in the party, I don't know, man. Like, fighting with other nerds over nothing is better than whatever they were doing in their basement or whatever. So you only get the not cool nerds that stick around. Everybody else dips their toes in and they get the fuck out. They don't want to be a part.
But there have been some examples. I mean, you being one example, and I mean, maybe that's a good note for us to end this.
There's cool people. There's cool people in the party.
And clearly you're one of them, and I'm going to show that right after this by showing another one of your videos, my favorite video. But I wanted to thank you for being on the show. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for the work that you're doing and for making this scene beautiful. So, Judd Weiss, we will see you again. And before we say goodbye, Christian, why don't we see this other video from Judd? Thank you, Judd.
Awesome.
Let's jump back to us, Christian. Why don't you jump back to both of us? So yeah, man, that's I think important thing, important concepts, and an important embodiment through Judd of the idea that there are many paths to a goal, and that there's room for all of them.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I mean, I myself do not participate in politics. I do not vote. I believe voting is violence. We've had a voting is violence episode with Peter Kallman. I don't vote because of principle, but if there are people who in general have the principles that I have of libertarianism, and that's the one thing that they're still doing is voting. That's the one place that they have not evolved, in my opinion, but yet they still hold a lot of things. Those are allies to me. You know, those are people, while I am not going to participate in what they're participating in, I'm also not going to shun them. And, you know, it's a big tent. Mm-hmm. It's a really big tent. I understand that in many ways I'm a purist, right? Mm-hmm. My approach to things is to be a purist, but you got to have the purist. You got to have the person all the way out here. Not everybody's going to get there. And I recognize that. And you know what? Just because you're not out where I'm at doesn't make you a bad person.
Right.
Because it takes evolution.
Yeah, one of the things he said, too, was one of the phrases that's thrown around a lot is everybody's a libertarian. Mm-hmm. And he said that he didn't agree with that. And I do think I was kind of relating it to this episode, too, in patterns. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that everybody wants liberty, but they're not a libertarian. And the pattern that causes that is fear.
Yeah, well, they say if you will give up, those who would give up freedom for security will receive neither. Mm-hmm. You know, when you...
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's really what being a libertarian, a small L libertarian, someone who's about liberty, right? Whether that's an anarchist, whether that's a minarchist, small government libertarian, you know, regardless of what it is that the freedom is it's either freedom or fear sitting in that space, right? You either desire freedom or you desire the security to take away the fear. Mm-hmm. And it's with the fear. It's with building fear, and it's what this whole episode has been about, right? Mm-hmm. Building fear is how people take your liberty.
Yep. Can't have both.
You can't have both. And it's you're either moving in love or you're moving in fear. And people like Judd Weiss are showing, as you could clearly see from what he's trying to push forward, is he's trying to push forward the idea of this is about love. This is a positive movement.
And you can see it through his work.
You can see it. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid. It's about love. Interesting. Just as a little side note, didn't fit into a story, but I found it interesting. One of the things that came out this week, it's total non sequitur here, but about Trump's taxes, right? And it kind of goes with that, the whole fear, right? Because there was this whole idea that release your tax returns, and he released them, right? For 2005. And Rachel Maddow released them, which it was a total win for Trump, because in 2005, what she had was that he made $150 million and he paid $38 million in taxes, which is like 24% tax rate. Something funny, right? Talking about fair share and goes to our buddy, because we were talking about getting the Bernie people.
Yeah.
So I thought this one's good for the Bernie people, right? Fair share. Pay 1%. They need to pay their fair share. The 1%. They're not paying their fair share. Okay, so a little fair share, little not so intellectual, but just like simple facts. Maybe these are the types of things. So Bernie Sanders, in his most recent tax return, paid about $28,000 in taxes. That was a 13% tax rate.
Wow.
Trump paid $38 million in 2005, which was a 25% tax rate. So double the tax rate of Bernie from his most recent. It would take Bernie Sanders 1,357 years to equal what Trump contributed in a single year.
Wow. That's crazy.
Is Bernie paying his fair share? Plus, remember this, Sanders' entire salary, including the taxes he paid, was stolen from citizens. Whereas Trump's income was earned by creating value. Bernie Sanders gets paid in taxes. Donald Trump paid taxes.
Crazy. So Donald Trump paid
way more than Bernie's fair share.
He paid Bernie Sanders.
Funny little non sequitur. We're just about out of time, man. Great show today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just say goodbye to the people.
All right.
So, in honor of me now being a part of the Illuminati, according to the folks out there, and Moloch says, yeah, yes, yes. Look, it's all about patterns. If you're in it, if you're looking at it, if your eyes are open, just like our guest, Judd Weiss, really want to thank him for being on. If you're there and your eyes are open and you're trying to capture the surroundings around you, you start to see patterns. You start to notice that history repeats itself. It doesn't mean that there's someone at the levers. Do powerful people conspire? Sure they do. Sure they do. But even their conspiracies are in patterns. Like the conspiracy that we can clearly see the pattern of marching us towards war. And are we going to fall back into the same patterns? We're going to protest. We're going to try to elect somebody to office. We're going to cheer when Rand Paul gets up against the war, just like his father did before him. And look what happened. We're still in Iraq. We're still in Afghanistan. We still have the Fed, even though the audit the Fed bill went through. Or are we going to try to take some new steps? Are we going to try to think different and act different? These are the choices that we have to make. And we are going to try to present you with a different way of thinking so that you can act differently. And we're going to do that again next week, right here, Monday, 10 a.m. You can check out the archive of the show at youtube.com/Vin Armani, or the little segments where we chop them up. You can check that out, youtube.com/activistpost. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can get that on iTunes and Stitcher. I want to thank my guest for today, Judd Weiss. And of course, I'd like to thank my co-host and producer, Mr. Christian Reyes. So we will see you again next week. And until then, stay free.